And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Strategy Show. It is Thursday, October 14th. I am Josh Engelman. I am joined by Adam Scher. We've only got one game to talk about. Dodgers, Giants for the right to head on to the NLCS to meet my Braves. Should be interesting. Go Giants, I guess. Either way, hit that like button as you get in the door. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Adam, elimination baseball. Are you excited for it?
Yeah, I mean, I wish it wasn't during the Thursday night football game, but yeah, it's the two best teams in baseball. It's game 5. It should be a pretty exciting game.
The line is really interesting. I mean, it's basically a coin flip. San Francisco gets the benefit of playing at home. They got to beat them out. Makes it so that it feels pretty good to win your division. You do get this matchup against the divisional opponent, and you get to host that final game. So it does at least make home field worth it. I'm excited to actually check it out, but I'm more excited to just see who the Braves are going to be playing coming out of this one. Fingers crossed for the Braves this year. Not feeling great against either one of these squads, particularly the Dodgers, but it's baseball. Anything can happen. I'm going to hit you with it now. Who wins?
I mean, I'll take the Giants. It really just feels like a coin flip. Like, yeah, they're at home, so that's kind of the edge for me. But I mean, both pitchers are good. You're gonna have, I assume, short leashes on both guys, where the bullpen is getting in pretty quickly. Both offenses are good, so I don't know. I think it's just a really evenly matched series and game, I think.
Well, let's go ahead and dive in. Let's talk a little bit about the pitching. Julio, Urias, and Logan Webb. Urias is, let's see, what's that price tag? 15.6 in the captain spot on DK. Logan Webb 15.9. So basically the same price. Shouldn't really make a difference between the two. We have Urias projected a half point more than Webb. So let's start with Urias. Or actually, holistic question. Who do you think is more likely to go deeper in the game?
Webb.
Okay.
I think. I mean, it's even that is close. Like, I think if Urias is pitching really well, they'll let him keep going. If Webb's pitching really well, they'll let him keep going. I don't think either one is going to be allowed to work through much adversity here. But I just think, like, we've seen Dave Roberts. He pulled Scherzer at 4 1/3 against the Cardinals in the wild card game, in a situation where he put a couple guys on base, and Roberts just pretty much said, okay, like, you're done. And that's Max Scherzer. He did it with Buehler the other day as well, a situation where I think a lot of managers would have let Buehler work through it just because of how good Buehler is. We saw him pull him there. I don't think Urias, I certainly don't think Urias is going to have a longer leash than either of those guys in an elimination game. I wouldn't be surprised if it's even shorter. So I just think that Webb's leash might be a little bit longer than Urias's, even though I don't expect it to be particularly long for either guy.
Okay. I don't mean this like just generally speaking for our particular projections, but given that information, do you think Webb should be projected higher than Urias? Like, I don't think it really matters here. We're talking about a half point. We're talking about basically the same salary. Like, these guys are largely equals as best I can tell, but should Webb have the nod if he's more likely to go deep here?
I think maybe by a little bit, but I think they should be really, really close. Because again, I think that even though I think Webb is probably going to be allowed to work through a little bit more stuff than Urias, I still don't think that he's just going to be, allowed to get himself out of jams either. And I also think that if Urias is pitching well, he's still going to be able to go, 6-7 innings if he's pitching well. I'm not expecting it to be like, I think Urias is a good enough pitcher. I'm not expecting it to be, okay, cool, Urias got us 3 innings, now get him the hell out. I think if he's pitching well, that he's going to be allowed to keep going.
Who can we roster that isn't Urias and Webb if we wanted to get to pitching? Do you have any interest in doing that?
In tournaments, sure. I don't think it's typically necessary in cash games. I was looking at the recent bullpen usage. Obviously, they didn't play yesterday, but for the Dodgers on Tuesday, nobody threw more than 20 pitches. So I'm assuming it's going to be all hands on deck. The only guy that I would think maybe isn't available would be Blake Trinan. He pitched Tuesday and Yeah, Tuesday and Monday. But even that, 20 and 15 pitches, I assume he's going to be available here. Joe Kelly, I think we've seen Joe Kelly kind of be like the fire guy in the middle innings. He's who they brought in for Scherzer. I think he's who they brought in for Bueller. I'm not 100% sure. But he's kind of been the guy to come in and get out of jams. So I would look to him just because I think there's a very good chance he ends up pitching here at some point. Kenley Jansen, obviously, if the Dodgers are winning, is likely to get into the game. But Kelly would be the guy that I look to out of the Dodgers bullpen. Gratterall as well, I think a reasonable option. But Kelly would be first just because we've sort of seen him be the priority, I think, for Dave Roberts.
All right. So since no one's watching, I don't care. I just want to figure this out for myself. Whenever you're talking, it sounds like a helicopter is going to take off. Are you on your correct microphone? Is it plugged in correctly? Are you doing anything different than normal?
I was on the wrong mic.
There it is. I thought like, all right, whatever. We'll just get to 10:30 and it'll be fine. And then it wasn't getting any better. And I was like, okay, we're just going to correct this problem immediately. Were you typing as well by any chance? Or
I was clicking my mouse.
Okay, yeah. Every one of those clicks was just like it was really muffled. Anyway, perfect. I was hoping we were going to get to that point. It was going to be very helpful there. Is there anything else that we could really talk about from a pitching perspective at this point? I mean, it's sort of an elimination matchup like this is so difficult to have any confidence in really anything.
Yeah, exactly. I think that there's just like a lot of variance in. We're good.
Yeah, it just sounds so much better.
Yeah, there's just a lot of variance, I think, in how deep the pitchers are going to be allowed to go. But I do think that makes it so in tournaments you can take more chances. You know, like pitchers are always going to be popular because they project so well. But because there's the risk of these guys getting pulled early if they get in any sort of trouble, I think that in tournaments maybe it's a little bit more appealing to get away from pitching in a game like this than it would be in, game 1 or game 2.
Urias projected for 60% ownership. Logan Webb projected for 58. The projections are the same. The salary is basically the same. The ownership is basically the same. Do you expect to get to one of these guys more than the other, or are you just sort of anticipating it probably ends up looking kind of equal? Or if you end up with more on one, like you didn't really see it coming?
Yeah, I would expect it to be pretty equal. I think that if one of them ends up being projected for lower ownership, I mean, right now we have Webb at 18% projected ownership at captain, 25.5% for Urias. I think it's pretty reasonable and pretty likely I would end up just kind of flipping that, since I don't think there's really much reason to have a preference between the two. And if I did have a preference, it would be Webb anyway. But yeah, I mean, I expect to be pretty similar, but I do think that just kind of flipping the ownership it's a situation where that is something I would expect to happen for me.
All right. We have a massive schedule for today. 8 more live shows coming up. At 11 a.m., we've got the NFL Strategy Show Matchups Edition, Laffy and Matt Savoca. At 1 p.m., that kicks off every hour on the hour, or sometimes on the half hour, additional shows. The Awesemo Betting Show with Eitan and Ben at 1. The NHL Strategy Show at 2 p.m. with Cliffy and Josh, not me. The Yahoo NFL Show at 3 p.m. with Adam Kaufman and Greg. We've got the 3:30 Jock Market NFL Show with Eitan and Eric. We're not done yet. 4 p.m. MMA Strategy Show. Myself filling in for Jason Floyd with Pete the Heat Rogers, talking about this Saturday's UFC card. NFL Deeper Dive at 6:30 with Laffy, Alex, and Ben. And then NFL Live Before Lock at 7:30 with Eric and Neil Orfield. Lots going on at Awesemo today. Plus, MLB ownership free. Oh, we just talked about it a little bit ago. You can hop directly to it if you want to. Go directly to awesemo.com, browse to our MLB Showdown ownership or single game ownership. You'll be able to use that. Plus, our NFL Top Plays tool is also free. Lots of free today. Lots of good stuff. What am I getting DMs for? Nobody from this show. So that's fine. Well, let's talk hitting. I think that is the next spot that we want to go to. Let's start looking at it from a FanDuel perspective, since they don't actually have to worry all that much about pitching because it is not included. Highest owned guys right now: Trey Turner, Will Smith, Corey Seager, and Mookie Betts. 4 straight Dodgers. just hit me with it here. Who stands out as some of the better options for you on FanDuel?
I mean, Betts, Trey Turner obviously stand out. I think the ownership makes sense on those guys. Will Smith is really cheap, so I think he makes sense. As far as lower owned guys, Justin Turner at 6,500. Like, I don't really know why there's a gap between him and Will Smith at that same price tag. They're both, just good hitters. So the Dodgers kind of just seem to be standing out the most, which I guess makes sense. But you don't really have the top four guys in ownership are all on the Dodgers. Then you get, Darren Ruff, Chris Bryant, Flores. But I think that it's pretty much the guys you would expect. Trey Turner, Corey Seager, Mookie Betts, Smith at that price tag looks pretty good.
All righty. I desperately have to fill a water or I'm going to rake my throat out. Something is stuck in my throat. Talk to me a little bit about how the ownership is shaking out in that seeing so many Dodgers at the top. Does that make the Giants slightly more appealing?
Yeah, I think so. And again, it's just like we were talking about with the pitching with Webb and Urias. I don't think you should have a very strong preference between which team you get to here, which stack you get to. So I think that ownership should just drive a lot of your decision making. And if you're going to get a little bit more ownership going to the guys from the Dodgers, with Trey Turner, Smith, Seager, Betts, all, the top four guys in projected ownership, you shouldn't be that hesitant to just go to the Giants more often, get more Wilmer Flores, more Chris Bryant, Austin Slater, decent chance he ends up getting pinch hit for, but he's also only 4,500. Longoria is cheap. The Giants in general are less expensive than the Dodgers as well. I just think that given how equal I think the pitching matchups are, and the fact that both of these offenses are really good as well, even if the Dodgers have a little bit more name value, we know the Giants are really good as well. You really shouldn't have a strong preference between the two. So if ownership holds where the Dodgers are, do have the four highest owned guys, I don't really see any reason why you wouldn't start moving to the Giants pretty quickly.
Do you see any ownership numbers on FanDuel in particular? We're going to stick here before we bounce over to DraftKings. Do you see any ownership numbers that stand out to you as either I'm surprised this guy is getting this much ownership or I'm surprised this guy isn't getting more?
None of them in the sense of I'm surprised that they're getting that much. I'm a little surprised that like Longoria is as low as he is, that Chris Taylor is as low as he is. Like when you have Will Smith getting 40% ownership at 6,500, it's kind of surprising to me that Chris Taylor at 7K is only getting 23%. Crawford is low owned, but I understand it because of the lefty-lefty matchup. I do think that's a spot you can take advantage of though, because if the Giants, like if you're stacking Giants hitters and the Giants are doing well, you're getting Urias out of the game. You're getting one of their best hitters at low ownership, probably not in a platoon disadvantage for the entire game. So I understand why Crawford's ownership is so low, but I do think it makes him a really good tournament play.
Do you prefer the FanDuel or the DraftKings style of single game baseball more? No pitchers for FanDuel is the obvious difference here.
DraftKings.
Yeah, I figured as much. Same for me. I wouldn't want to do it differently. I do like, it's weird. I wish DraftKings did more like the MVP star utility, like maybe an additional multiplier spot. I wish FanDuel would change make the salaries more expensive as you put people there. Both of those mechanisms can get better. I just wish they would sort of combine what they're doing. But I agree, DraftKings better here. All right. What else can we touch on from a FanDuel perspective? Anybody that isn't starting in a game that is viable to you?
Yastrzemski is the first one that comes to mind.
Sure.
You're probably going to get Austin Slater leading off for the Giants. I think there's a good chance that the first time that Slater is supposed to face a right-handed pitcher, he comes out of the game. Yastrzemski, if he hasn't already pinch hit for Webb, would be my guess. If he's not in the starting lineup, obviously, would be my guess. You also Lamont Wade, if he's not in the lineup, either of those guys would be like the first two that I look to, because I think there's just a really, really good chance that those guys get at bats, whether it ends up being for the pitcher and then they stay in the game, or it ends up being for Slater and they stay in the game. I think that there's a pretty good chance that, by let's say the sixth inning, at least one of Yastrzemski or Lamont Wade is in the game.
Does that make you concerned at all about Slater's ownership? 30% is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. He's really cheap, and he's not a bad hitter, but I do think he's probably the most likely player in this game to get pinch hit for. So it is, a little bit concerning. You're just expecting, and I mean, it's going to be reflected in projections. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And one thing that I know you and I have talked about a lot is not double counting stuff. It's going to be reflected in projections that Slater probably isn't getting as many at bats as everyone else. So you don't want to just blindly say, oh, well, when I crunch lineups, I'm getting a lot of Austin Slater, but I think he's going to be pinch hit for, so I'm going to not play him because that is accounted for. It does affect the ceiling a little bit, or at least chances of getting there, because you're not likely to get as many at bats. So it is a situation where I think you want to at least keep in mind that the median projection doesn't tell the whole story in terms of where the ceiling actually is for him compared to some other players.
Anything else you want to touch on from FanDuel?
No, I think that's about it. There's not, I mean, from the Dodgers side, there's not really much that I see in the way of pinch hitting. Like, most of these guys just, I don't think are going to get pinch hit for. So I think it's pretty much the Wade and the Yastrzemski spots that are worth mentioning.
All righty. Got to hit you guys with a promo code. NHL is back. Number one NHL tout Adam would tell you so. Crosscheck is the promo code. CROSSCHECK. Get your first week of Awesemo plus NHL for only $3 using that promo code. That covers projections, ownership, top stacks, lineup builder, premium slack, and more. You're getting 75% off that first week. You guys can see it on the screen right now. Use that promo code crosscheck. It's only going to be $3 for that NHL pass. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. That's not the only people we need to talk about. We needed to give a little bit of a shout out to the presenting sponsor of this show. That would be Jock Market. They have turned fantasy sports into a stock exchange. You can make money every minute, second, hour, no matter what. You can buy and sell shares in real time during the games. You can use the promo code Awesemo when you sign up. Get a $50 bonus on your first deposit. All you have to do is download the app in the App Store to get started. They have markets for the NFL, MLB, obviously, NHL, NBA, and PGA. You pick up shares in a pregame IPO phase, and then you can buy, sell, or hold during the game. They also have their first market guarantee. If a new user doesn't profit their first NFL cash market, they are refunded up to $100. So make sure you're taking a chance there. Feel free to use everything you can up to 100 because there's no downside for you whatsoever. We also have Jock Market IPO projections to help you beat the market. They are free on awesemo.com. So thank you to Jock Market for helping us out. Let's talk a little bit about DraftKings here. DraftKings changes it up a little bit from FanDuel. We do get to speak a little bit about the pitching. And right now, we touched on the pitching out of the gate, so we don't really have to go there. We're going to go straight to the hitters, where Austin Slater, 4,800 on DK, the highest projected owned player today at 49%. We touched on him a little bit in the FanDuel section. Are you more likely to just be lighter there and hope to get a little bit different?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the salary becomes a little bit, I think, more useful on DraftKings than on FanDuel, since you do have the pitching to pay up for, and you don't really have a whole lot of alternatives. He's 4,800. You have Donovan Solano at 4,400, but he's also getting ownership. There's nobody else in the projected starting lineup that's below 5K. You start having to get to 5,400 for Flores, 5,800 for Bellinger. So I think that there is a chance that when you start building lineups, Slater just is useful to get pitching in. But I think that just from a focusing on Slater perspective, it's a spot where I would like to not have as much as the field, just because half the field is playing a guy because his median projection is very good for his salary. But like we already mentioned when we talked about FanDuel, the top of the range of outcomes for him is cut off a bit, I think, compared to other guys.
How do relievers matter for you on DraftKings, since it doesn't matter at all on FanDuel? Most of these guys, pretty much every single one of these guys, showing up at 4K. We also have the potential for other starters to show up. There's a 0% chance, I think, that anybody's going to want to go to Scherzer or Buehler or anything like that from the Dodgers side or the Giants side because the salaries are going to be too high. Do you generally try to get to relievers when you're playing, whether that's a GPP or cash format?
In cash, I typically don't. And tournaments, I think it's more useful. And like you said, there's a decent chance that you get, depending on how the game goes, like if one of the starting pitchers gets in trouble early, there's a decent chance you see a starter come out of the bullpen. That's not really useful for our purposes since they are expensive. But, we had talked about it before when we talked about the bullpen usage. I think, a 4K Joe Kelly is reasonable. Really, like the ceiling isn't high. You're not going to get, 12 points from Joe Kelly or something like that. I wouldn't think, looking at his recent games, he's, around 3 to 4 fantasy points, but trying to, kind of think through how he ends up being useful. He's only 4K. So he's going to let you, pay up for, let's say, Logan Webb, since he doesn't, since he's the pitcher on the other team, or it's going to let you get 5 of the best hitters elsewhere in your lineup. And when you have half of the field playing Austin Slater, there's a pretty decent chance Austin Slater takes a 0 and you're 3 from Joe Kelly while also saving you $800 and getting much less ownership can end up being, a difference maker. So it's not my favorite thing to do just because you're never getting those huge games from someone like Kelly, but it's still reasonable in that there's ways this game can go where the cheap hitters that people use just get 0 because it's baseball, and that happens a lot. And that, you're 3 to 4 points from Joe Kelly and being a difference maker.
Would this be more interesting to you, less interesting to you, or it wouldn't really change anything for you? It seems like every single individual, like one game slate for baseball, everybody that's chalk is the cheapest guys on the slate that are in the starting lineup. Everybody that's the opposite of chalk are just sort of the most expensive guys on the slate. Would it be more interesting if all of the cheaper guys were incrementally a little bit more expensive and all of the studs were incrementally less expensive, and we sort of just had ownership that was 25 to 30% clear across the board?
I think it would be more interesting for tournaments. I think it would kill cash games.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you still get people, I think, with the pricing differences in cash games, you are still going to get, people have to make some decision. If everybody, basically if you made it like preseason football pricing and everybody's the same or close to it, I think, in cash games, it would just become very clear, like you're just playing the best players. In tournaments, though, it would be interesting just because chances are people wouldn't account for baseball being baseball quite enough, and you would get low ownership on guys that are good plays, but not as good as, your Mookie Betts, Trey Turner type guys.
I just don't want Austin Slater to be 49% owned and Justin Turner to be 15.5. Like it would be significantly, just as a product. Like I would expect them to want to have more stars be owned more. Like that would make it more interesting to the casual, I would expect. Or the casual is just making bad lineups by putting in Justin Turner and then, 2 relievers or something with random people. I don't know. I was just looking at it. And I was like, oh, this is the same every time. It's just you flip the salary table in reverse and those are the chalkiest guys. And like that just seems like a lazy mechanism.
Yeah. And I mean, and from what you were saying, as far as just like it being fun to build lineups, I agree with that. Like I've just been playing cash throughout the postseason, but it's always just like, I make my lineup and it's like, oh, cool. I got 2 pitchers. I got Martin Maldonado because he's cheap. I got, some other, shitty hitter from the other team because he's cheap. And then it's just like, oh, I'm going to, sweat this game where I get to just watch and hope the 9 hitter gets a hit.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels broken for baseball a little bit. You're not going to hear anybody talk about it because no one cares. But it was just when I looked at it, I was like, oh, this would be so much more interesting if this just flipped on its head a little bit.
Well, I mean, and they used to have a better showdown. DraftKings had a better showdown product too. They had different scoring for relief pitchers.
Yeah.
Which made it really interesting. I remember when I first came to Awesemo, writing an article during the postseason for every slate, just breaking down relief pitcher usage and, all of that. And it just made it so much more interesting. Like now, like you're talking about Joe Kelly and others and basically saying, okay, well, if he gets 3 points, it's better than if he can beat Austin Slater with 3 points. But when you used to get bonus points for strikeouts from relievers and innings pitched from relievers, it was like a legitimate extra strategy or extra component to the strategy.
So who stands out most to you? I guess relative to ownership, but I guess it doesn't really matter all that much. Who are some of the bats that you would like to target for today's slate?
Relative to ownership?
Yeah.
So I think, and I'd mentioned it on FanDuel, but it's showing up the same on DraftKings. Brandon Crawford's really interesting to me just because, especially like when you're in tournaments, if you're, correlating and running, 4 or 5 Giants, I think Crawford's really interesting because he's such a good hitter. And if the Giants are doing well, there's a good chance that he's not facing a lefty for most of the game. So I think that it's just a situation where if the Dodgers, let's say like Walker Buehler were pitching today instead of Urias, obviously it would still be a tough matchup, but I think you would just have a lot more ownership going to Crawford because he's so good and he's one of the best hitters on this team. But just because he's facing a lefty, I think you see that ownership come down. There's certainly a decent chance that he only faces Urias once, and then it's bullpen. Not that the matchup becomes any better, but it's just that he would be more popular, I think, if Urias wasn't left-handed, and there's a decent chance he's only getting 1 or 2 at bats against him. So Crawford at low ownership, I think, is really interesting. Chris Bryant, kind of the same thing, 15% ownership in that same boat as Justin Turner, you had mentioned before. He's just, it's in tournaments, it's interesting, because you can get away. I think you can get away from the pitching in tournaments. We'd already talked about there's a decent chance that if either of these guys get in trouble, they're coming out pretty quickly and, sort of underwhelming at their price tag. Going to some of these expensive bats at low ownership, like Chris Bryant, like Justin Turner, I think is pretty appealing because, it's not that difficult. Like if one of these guys hits a home run, there's a pretty good chance they're outscoring both pitchers, if not, at least one of them.
Yeah. 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 Any home run is like auto optimal lineup, right?
Yeah.
Barring like a 12-8 final or something where there's plenty of opportunities.
Yeah, barring like a ridiculously high scoring game, or if for some reason a hitter was priced at like 11K or something. But as is, you would expect any home run to be optimal.
Do you pay attention to lineup construction? Like, are you worried about this one's got 4 Giants, 2 Dodgers, or anything like that? Like, are you trying to play out a story for baseball, or is it just sort of like these 6 guys will play?
So, full disclaimer, I haven't been playing tournaments. So, take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. It's me kind of just thinking through it. On the one hand, I think that it still would make sense to stack in tournaments because you are still getting positive correlation. On the other hand, and this is something that you would kind of just have to go back through lineup study and see what people are doing. I think stacking makes sense, but I also think there's probably a good chance that it's not as useful as people make it out to be. And I'm just kind of thinking to like NFL Showdown, where I know one big talking point lately has been that you don't want to like build, you don't want to restrict yourself in a 1-game sample. You don't on a 1-game slate, you don't want to restrict yourself from getting to a bunch of lineups because negative correlation, it's a factor, but it's not, you don't necessarily want it to drive your entire decision making because it's just 1 game and stuff happens a lot. So I don't think I would put a huge emphasis on it. I think that in a tiebreaker situation, I would rather have a 4 or 5 man stack. Like if I'm playing 1 tournament lineup and I think it's really close, but I have, let's say 4 Dodgers and then I think it's really close between, I don't know, Mookie Betts and Chris Bryant, I would rather go Mookie Betts in that situation, but I don't think it's something I'd put a huge emphasis on.
And I know I asked you this on Tuesday, but I'll ask again. Oh my God, I lost my question. This was a good question too. I got nothing. Whatever it was, it's gone. It's out of my brain. That's like the first time I think that's ever happened on a show for me. I was teed up and ready to go. I had like one final thing for you. And now I have no idea what I was about to ask you. Well, I guess I'll remember when it's finally over. Something about ownership. No. Lineup construction. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I think
if you used a run sheet, you wouldn't have that problem.
I have a run sheet. The question just came to me while you were talking. It was based on something that you said. What do you know about a run sheet? I missed Mr. D Go Blue kind of nailed it here. We touched on who we think wins. This is a really difficult game. It's as even as it's going to get. The betting lines are saying the same thing. The pitchers look very similar. I give the slight nod to the Dodgers offense, but the Giants are at home, so I think that probably equalizes. I have seen a Giants-Dodgers game live and in person. I wish that I could see this one more so than the one that I did see, Johnny Cueto versus Clayton Kershaw, which was really fun to watch. But got to give a dong pick. Does anybody hit a homer today? I can tell you right now, we have 2 guys on our prop tool that have positive expected ROIs today. The rest of it, the lines aren't looking all that solid. So who dongs in this game?
Give me Brandon Crawford. So Urias has actually given up more power to lefties than righties this year. Crawford does have a 178 expected ISO against left-handed pitching this year. He's always been a decent hitter against left-handed pitching. Well, outside of the years that he just couldn't hit anybody. But yeah, I don't know. I'll take Crawford. I think that's an interesting one.
Okay. Darren Ruff has the highest expected ROI at a no prop, minus 833. Expected ROI there, 2%. But I'm going to go the opposite direction for it. I'm going to say that Darren Ruff hits a home run today.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Man. That's all I got, man. Do you have anything else you want to add for this game?
Just, I guess, the big thing for me on this slate, because everything is just so even across the board. I think ownership should just really be driving decisions even more so than usual.
I think this is probably the last MLB strategy show.
I have no idea.
If I had to guess, I don't know where they're going to fit in on single game slates moving forward. I don't know if that's going to be true or not.
I got one tomorrow.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh, there's 2 games tomorrow, right? No, wait, no, there's not. There's one. It's just the AL, right?
The Red Sox game.
Oh, well, glad that it's you and Greg. Good luck to everybody. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you to Jock Market for being the sponsor of this show. Best of luck when you're playing here. If you're doing this alongside NFL, Contenders videos are out. We also have the deeper dive and live before lock shows coming up later today. Oh, there's the message from Chris. Plan is to still do strategy. All right, so don't listen to me, everybody. MLB strategy shows aren't going anywhere. Enjoy them. Good luck tonight. Go Giants, because I think the Braves have a better chance to beat the Giants than the Dodgers. Peace.